just start with introductions, maybe.
Okay. Thank you to everybody who's joining to watch. It's very exciting. Have you guys been doing lots of Zooms? Oh, feedback.
Yeah, it's been quite, I mean, Zoom meetings during the day, which are never as exciting as the nighttime Zoom meetings. So it's always good to do talks and especially just hear from people. What's really nice is people from all over the world can, like, you know, plug in, which is not usually the case when you've got a bunch of British filmmakers talking to each other. So that's really lovely, actually. That's been quite a treat.
It has been quite nice.
I wonder if you'll have any international people here.
I'm sure you guys will bring an international crowd, a legacy proceeding, all that. So yes, I guess we're just waiting for one more guest, and hopefully she'll be around soon. So there's first question. Speaking of live Zoom events, has anyone seen? I don't know. Hey. Oh, a day on Zoom. Yeah, that's not great.
Hi, I'm here. Sorry.
Hi, Dr. Leyla. How are you? Your
Hello.
name is different from who? So we'll correct that.
The picture, I know. I mean, pre quarantine. This is the after quarantine look.
No, your name says David Martinez, and so that not your face. Oh gosh, no.
Even my picture. Sorry.
No, I would never comment on your picture. You're gorgeous. No, I wouldn't say that. So we were just having a chat about Zoom and living our lives on Zoom, but this is obviously a very different event. Just to introduce myself, my name is Akua Gyamfi. I'm the founder of the British Blacklist, which is a platform that celebrates British Black talent, creatives in the arts across screen, stage, literature and sound. And I've been asked to moderate this wonderful conversation with you guys on behalf of Raindance Film Festival or Film Club and 16 Days, 16 Films. So hello to all of you. I think how this is going to go, I'm going to chat to you for a bit, not take over the floor too much, and then we'll literally open it up to the floor. So guys who are watching, I think put your questions in the chat, and then one of our moderators will read it out at the appropriate time, and then we'll get into some good old meaty discussion for about an hour or so. So is everybody good? Everyone clear about what's going on?
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I think first of all, can we go around the room and just have you guys introduce yourselves with one line about what you do. If you can say it in a line, I don't know, give yourself a good introduction. I'll start with Uzma. I'm looking at my screen. So Uzma, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Uzma Hasan. I'm a film and television producer. I run a production company called Little House Productions.
Myriam.
Hi, so I'm Myriam. I'm a writer and director, and I've just graduated from the National Film and Television School last year. And I made the film The Third Sorrow, which won the 16 Days, 16 Films competition.
Eden?
Hi everyone, my name is Eden Tinto Collins. I've been formed in the National School of Fine Arts in Paris, so I'm French. And maybe I should say sorry right now because my English isn't perfect, but I will try to manage to be able to make sense and to follow the excellent panel of tonight. I have directed with Gister, Adrien Peskin, Woman, The Nightmare of You Know Who, and I'm really happy to meet you tonight.
Your English is fine, and I will try and speak slowly because I can really speak really fast. It's a bad habit, so I will slow down my talk as well. And finally, Dr. Leyla, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Leyla Hussein. I'm a psychotherapist by background. I'm also the founder of the Dahlia Project, which is the first ever counselling service in Europe for FGM survivors. But I'm also the founder of Magol, which is an enterprise company that works with individuals and organizations on their emotional well-being. But I'm also known for being a big loudmouth human rights activist. I tried to chase Theresa May down the streets a few times while being part of a documentary. So I presented a documentary for Channel 4 a couple of years ago. Yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. So what unifies us all, apart from being wonderful women, is that through the arts, you all, through whether via visual or literature, you're all giving voice to issues around gender equality. So I wanted to ask each of you, why was your chosen medium of art your choice to highlight these issues? Again, I'll start with Uzma.
Hi. I was very purposeful. I started in the film industry about 10, 15 years ago. I started in I started doing PR straight out of university, and whilst I was like climbing the corporate ladder at my company and you know, doing very well and all the rest of it, 9/11 happened, and it really threw me, and it really kind of changed my worldview, and it made me realize that, well, a few things: A, that I wanted to do something meaningful with my life, and B, I kind of knew in that moment how powerful images were. And I realized that I wanted to be in the image industry. So, I one of the reasons I chose cinema was I think there's very few places, especially now in the world, where you can have someone's undivided attention for 2 hours in a darkened room. So yeah, that's why I chose film.
Dr. Leyla.
Oh God, I mean, besides all the things that I said, but I also, I've been writing for many years for different publications. For me, it was always, I wanted to tell our stories over and over again, especially I'm a survivor of female genital mutilation. Like any woman out there, I've also experienced, you know, oppression because of a patriarchal system that we are confined in. So for me, using creative ways, even in counseling, has been very important in telling the stories of the women I'm working with, including myself. So whether it's photography, writing, drama therapy. So that's why for me, using creativity has been extremely important. I'll give an example. One of the documentaries I presented for Channel 4, I was doing a scene with boys and I wanted to teach them about female genital mutilation. We created a vagina gallery for the boys. Oh, wow. Where we had a great wall of vulvas, and then we had another part where we had plasticines of vaginas, and I started cutting the vagina just to show. So for me, working with creative people has always been a big part of the work that I'm doing. So that's why I use those avenues. Yep.
Eden and Myriam, you both recently or graduated from film school or art school. So again, why was it important that you went that route and you've chosen these mediums to tell, you know, to champion unheard stories, I would say. Eden, go first, please.
Directing was clearly a necessity experienced by what I lived, so I couldn't choose any other voices to really try to harmonize, to rectify what I wish to see for us as a community. So really art was a long process of healing, and I still see it as a kind of world which is not totally true and not totally false, like an interworld, which is like connecting us in a forum for us to discuss about things which will have an impact into reality. So this way to transform things are really motorizing my everyday life, and I guess we can call this art, so that's why I'm here.
And Myriam, please.
Yeah, I started filmmaking quite young, and when I started, I was making horror films, and I remember being quite struck when people would watch them and react. And I decided, like, quite young, okay, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to disturb people. And then growing up, I grew up watching a lot of Bollywood films and also a lot of European cinema, and then sort of wanting to find a middle way between the two. But I've always been quite interested in the worlds I can present, and then also whose story am I able to tell. I can pick the character and I can write the character, and I can take people on that character's journey specifically. And so I began making films about characters that looked like me, or like looked like my mum, and whose stories I didn't really like get to see in cinema. And so I think, yeah, in that sense, I realized how important it is to be able to use this medium to just, yeah, be able to explore the stories that I wasn't seeing at the time.
I was going to ask, thank you. I was going to ask actually a question with a very obvious answer, that why is using the arts so important for getting these issues and plights heard? But actually, I wanted to say, what piece of work have you all individually worked on that has really validated your reasoning for using this medium, or your medium of choice, to amplify the message that you chose to amplify? I'll go with Dr. Leyla.
Yeah, actually, it was the documentary I was referring to. This was a documentary commissioned by Channel 4 in 2013. The idea was I wanted female genital mutilation to be recognized as a British issue, not just something that happens in Africa. This was happening here in the British girls. So the aim was to really, first, to educate the British public what FGM actually was, that it was a form of child abuse, not cultural, traditional, the language that it was being quoted in all the time. This is violence. Touching a child's genitalia is violence. And there was always an idea, if it's a brown or black child, we have to call it culture. And I wanted to call it the abuse that it was. And what came out of the film when it was screened, we created an e-petition. So I created an e-petition to ask the UK government why they haven't taken this seriously. And to show the power of the media, literally the night before the film went out, we had 3,000 signatures, and we needed 100,000 signatures. The night it went out, next morning, we had 70,000 signatures. And within weeks, we got 100,000 signatures. But it wasn't just debated on Parliament. It was, there was an inquiry launched against the UK government. Again, just shows how powerful using the tool of documentary making can really have an impact. Because, and I say this to anybody, you know, they say, you know, how do we get a response from a government? I say, get people outraged. And I've seen that always through the media. Getting public outrage always gets us best result, because we put politicians in place in order to make sure that, you know, we pay for their bills. So it's reminding people they need to be accountable. So really, with that documentary, The Cruel Cut, but I also wanted to be portrayed as myself, because I remember saying to the commissioner, I'm not doing dispatches, that's not me. I use cupcakes and pink tents, and I'm very humorous when I talk about pain. And they were really good at doing it. And obviously, the documentary did really well. We were nominated in Current Affairs BAFTAs. So this pink tent with women running around with a vagina, we were nominated amongst all these other serious documentaries. So it was, again, it just shows by using such media outlets, it really can have an impact, not just at grassroots level, but actually at political level. And that film is still shown till today as a form of education. So yeah, so that's an example I would like to share.
That's fine. And Myriam, could you answer, please?
Yeah, I've had examples in, I guess, in the development stage and also in the editing. So for example, when I pitched the idea for The Third Sorrow, and I said I want it to be all of it from the mother's perspective, who is going through with doing this to her daughter. And it was important to me that it was the mother's perspective, and she wasn't demonized as a villain. But my tutors at the film school didn't think that was the right approach, or they didn't think anyone would want to watch that, or they didn't think there was enough of a character arc. I had a similar comment when I wanted to do a film about a woman who doesn't leave her unhappy arranged marriage. And it was, the character was deemed passive in terms of conventional storytelling terms. And then most recently, I've done a short film called Azar, at the end of which a white man turns up on a horse and he's a colonialist. But the tutors thought the story could end earlier. We didn't need that image. And I thought, well, the image of one white man on a horse symbolizing colonialism to me is terrifying. Yeah. And I would like to include it, and I think it gives power. So it's weird. It's having had to sort of fight my corner at different stages, but each time, and then the films have gone out and affected people, and I think that's reinforced my decisions and that I believe in them. Yeah.
And Uzma answered the same project that really has validated your reasoning for highlighting issues.
Yeah, well, I think similarly to Myriam, I could talk through every single project I've done and speak about that exact process of having to fight your perspective and your point of view. I think even though I'm very much interested in making subversive stories that are for global audiences, that are commercial and that are accessible and audience friendly, I think doing that as a woman of color is a subversive act. I think doing that from a different perspective that we haven't seen is a subversive act. So I try to, in every television show I make or every film that I've made, beginning from my very first movie, which was The Infidel, is to try and do stories from a perspective that we haven't seen before, but actually is incredibly authentic, and it's almost surprising in its banality, actually, because it's so rare that we see on screen stories from different points of view. So I think that has been something that you have to really cultivate and protect your voice as a filmmaker throughout your career. So I think it exists in absolutely everything that I do. Yeah.
Eden, if I can ask you the same question. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, please, because it was like bugging.
Oh, sorry. Just so, and a piece of work that you feel really amplifies or validates the reason why you use film to tell stories of activism or issues and stuff like that. What film or project have you worked on that really cements that reasoning?
Oh, there's, I think, as Uzma just said, and also Myriam and Leyla, I guess, and everyone has a kind of path in which we are reasoning, and this struggle for human rights or progress for Black people and trans and women is just resonating so much with what I am. So with this meeting with Gister, the current director of Women, we really had a large impact into everything I did until now. And I think the way the movie is trying to tell about Europe brutality, because it's not just about police. Police really represents a European state in some way. So today it is in an alignment with what it is happening right now in the world. And I guess this is why we get that kind of large impact, but it is really a way of being. I mean, every day we are really breathing, thinking what we are putting into video. And what it is interesting also with video is that it is really going fast and can reach a lot of people through the world. So it is a really interesting medium. And also right now we are all empowered by a beautiful camera and telephone, mobile. So everyone can really interact with this way of telling stories. So I'm really also inspired by this way of making things like DIY. And this is also something we can, I think, feel in my creation and also Gister.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I think I wanted to ask Uzma directly, in this current climate, though it's led by the Black Lives Matter movement, the great issue in the UK is having diverse stories told by us and written by us, made by us. However, you know, broadcasters have recently put out a call, in the UK, put out a call for various Black and people of colour creatives to pitch stories of their experiences of racism and the like. So how should broadcasters find the balance between shedding light on causes, but also not peddling issue porn and only speaking to us for our sorrow stories?
Yeah, I think that is such an important point. And look, I think the very framing of this call out goes a lot towards speaking to who it is that is commissioning these stories and who it is that's paying for these stories and what understanding they have of us and the spectrum of our diversity and our diversity of thought, actually. I think for me personally, sort of suffering porn in terms of Black and brown people's life stories and other minorities' life stories is something that I personally really shy away from. It's not something that I want to put out there. I think it's really important for us to try and move that conversation forward as filmmakers. And I think part of the way we do it is recognizing that, I was just having this conversation today, if you're the only person in the room, if you're a young filmmaker, for example, I'm sure there must be young filmmakers that are on this call right now, it's really important because you are going to be wooed by everyone right now. Everyone's very, very desperate to show their bona fides and to say, oh, look, we've commissioned this and we've done this. It's really important that you surround yourself with people who can provide an infrastructure for you. And that infrastructure is not just to protect you in terms of the process of production, but it's also to protect you creatively and to protect your vision and to make sure that your voice is allowed to grow and flourish and say what it wants to say in the way it wants to say it. So for me, the question always is, who gets to tell what stories? And one of my really, really big bugbears is honor killing. And I feel like honor killing stories for the South Asian community is something that will get commissioned again and again and again. And pretty much every single year, there's at least one film or one major television series about it. Yeah. And you start digging a little bit deeper, and ITV is going to be broadcasting one this autumn. You start digging a little bit deeper and you see who commissioned that, who's writing it, who's directing it, who's producing it. And you realize that the film and television industries are very much complicit in perpetuating a certain idea of who we are as people and bodies of color. And I think it's really important for us across the board to not only try and get into those jobs and change that narrative, but speak up in meetings and say, actually, you know what? I want to just write something. I don't want to necessarily write something that is about your idea of who you think I am, or indeed my identity at all. I might just want to do a sci-fi film. I think that's the next stage of the conversation that I personally want to, see happen as quickly as possible. But I would say that right now, in this moment of desperation from commissioners, it's even more important that we try and hold on to that sense of what are the stories that we're putting out there, and even if we feel that actually if I do it in this way it's probably easier to get commissioned, sure, I'm sure it is, but we've got to try and move the dial a little bit every time with what we do.
I fully agree. Thank you for really agree. Eden, your film specifically your film Woman tackles police brutality, the superheroic powers of women, white male fragility, all wrapped up in a beautiful Afrofuturism package. Now, how or why did you decide to present these issues in this way? You're still on mute.
I think as I grew up in a working class environment, I wanted to do something that will empower us, because in our community, self-esteem should be revalued, I guess. I saw so many movies, medias, which were playing us into parallel worlds which were not in our favor, that I felt like we could really change this into rooms like Afrofuturism with music also, which is really something we know how to do. And build a kind of universe which will protect us. It's true that this universe is only images, and as we really produce this with our own money, and we all did it by ourselves, it is interesting to hear that there is a real missing of producers. And as I see you, I'm like, okay, maybe this is right now changing, and we can build imaginaries together at a higher state, because it was very like painful to go through this project without doubt, and now it's getting better. But yeah, it's true that we really need to know where the money comes from, and with who we are building imaginaries, because it's really impacting our everyday life also.
Absolutely. And I think what you're saying ties in with what Uzma was saying about owning our own narrative and having the space to tell original stories and being trusted to explore, because Afrofuturism is so broad and it's so imaginary, and you've got such room and license to go anywhere you want with it, and yet we're stifled in our home countries and having to deal with the gatekeepers, that we're stifled and not allowed to tell our stories. Which leads me on to asking Myriam, your story, Third Sorrow, isn't about your culture per se, it's through the lens of a Nigerian mother. And did you have, though you're a woman of color, so there's already a solidarity in there, however you are telling a story through the eyes of somebody who's Nigerian, was there any resistance or any doubt that you had in making this film, being from outside of that specific culture? And what has been some of the resistance, if you have been receiving the resistance to the final product?
Yeah, I was very nervous making the film, and then I was incredibly nervous when I screened it for the first time to an audience of mostly Black women. And I remember the reason I decided to tell that story was because something my mother had said to me about, oh, I wish I'd cut your wings before you decided to fly too high. And I know it was to do with control, and it always stuck in my head. And so I wanted to, the way I came at it was I wanted to explore this mother who, despite loving her child, is capable of hurting her child, and what that means. And so I came at it with no judgment, and not really, I think, wanting to preach about, oh, if Jim is wrong and it's a cultural thing, or like, I didn't want it to be any of that. But at the same time, I was definitely aware that it wasn't like something I've experienced, and do I have any right to tell this story? So I worked really closely with the actors, actually. So I wrote the script in English and I let them translate it. And I didn't speak the language, but I directed them and worked with them collaboratively. And then the reception has been quite incredible, actually, in terms of people being quite affected and really appreciating. So that was obviously a huge relief, but also, yeah, it took a lot from everyone on the team, actually, not, you know, like the editor and the cinematographer, all of us coming together and believing, I guess, what the essence of the story was and what it was that we were trying to say. And it wasn't, I didn't have any right, you know, to like be making a comment on FGM per se, but I wanted to explore more this one woman's experience and her story. So I approached it in that way.
Which is a lesson to people who do want to tell other people's stories about collaboration and being mindful that you're not, if you're not of that culture or community, that you have people who know it firsthand in the room with you and feeling a part of it. So at least you've got some reference to, like, this is who I consulted. And obviously that group doesn't necessarily speak for the whole community. However, you've done your due diligence in involving them in your project. And that's, I think it's the best way to approach telling, because we should be allowed to tell anyone's story, right? But with respect, especially something as sensitive as FGM. And Dr. Leyla, your project, The Girl Generation, which, as you said, looks at the emotional well-being of activists working with survivors of FGM. This is something I wanted to ask maybe all the filmmakers, and then bringing that back to you. How do you shake off that pain and sorrow that you feel when making such an intimate project? Because you've made the thing, it's out there, and then essentially you've done and dusted, unless you're like Dr. Leyla, that you work in the environment, so you could make something and you are still doing the work. So, Dr. Leyla, can you just talk about some of the work that you're doing with activists who maybe do work with people, then maybe, I don't know how it goes, like how they kind of shake it off and then come back into the field. And then I don't know if you've worked with filmmakers, activists who had to go through the same kind of process.
First of all, I just wanted to clarify for the audience who joined, FGM is a global issue. It is practiced in Asia.
Yes.
It's practiced amongst the Indian, Pakistani community, Indonesia, Malaysia, and all over the Middle East. I think there's also, again, there's an assumption it's an African issue. So Myriam had every right to make that film and for me, Myriam's film was never about FGM actually. It was about the relation between mother and daughter and patriarchy and how we're in that position. So it was never actually, so that's how I interpreted the film. And I think that's why it won all the awards that it won, because it was brilliantly done. So I just wanted to put that there. So the Girl Generation, I'm one of the advisors on that program. It's an Africa-led movement. I didn't find it. It was founded by African youth activists. And I was brought on as a psychotherapist, because for me, mental health is an area that we forget in activism, because we know when you're dealing with social issues, it has a personal effect on you. And this was something that I was impacted. So the reason I created this emotional wellbeing project, and actually we made a small little film documentary about it. It's online. And we wanted to highlight the voices of activists. People think activists are these superheroes on stage, which they are. They are dealing with the front line of one of the most dangerous spaces. I mean, I remember interviewing in this film one of the male activists who said someone shot at him, but he just went on with his life next day. So I brought my activism and my counseling background, psychotherapy background, and I guess the creative side by making it into a little small film for the African activists. But it was the idea of saying they need to be looked after. There's no point of trying to deliver such work if you're taking care of yourself first. And specifically, activists who are brown or black are always put in a position where they are at the forefront, or they're expected to deal with it, because you never hear white people dealing with any form of child abuse as a project. But when it comes to Black and Asian communities, they have to be at the forefront in terms of dealing with it. So I wanted to create and teach them the basics of actually, how do I look after myself, keep myself safe while I'm delivering this work. So, but within that group of activists, there were filmmakers, there were midwives. So it was a combination of different groups of people. But again, the theme, I think what connects them all in that space, it was creativity was very key again, even if you're a midwife. And what made that project super special, because we work, it's development. It was funded by, funded by a separate charity, but the Girl Generation is funded by the DFID. But I wanted to ensure it was Black space only. And I don't apologize for that, because usually when we go do work in Africa, it's usually white people coming over and sharing their ideas. This was actually a collaborative experience with because I cannot tell an activist in rural village in Kenya how to run a support group. So the idea was, hey guys, I have this idea. Let's work together. We worked together on this particular guide for a good 9 months. So it was a co-creation. So I would say to anyone out there, if you're working on a film or a project, it's important that those who you are featuring in that work are part of the co-creation, are part of the conversation. And Myriam's clearly used as an example in terms of how she made her film, because I think that's really, and what made this particular project extremely successful it was because it was the activists themselves who were part of the co-creation from day one. And actually, they the end product, a lot of them, they had a lot of input in there. So I think that's why it works like that. So what I'm saying is, but again, going back to that, only Black space was very important because they didn't have a white person telling them this is good for their country. To me, that was very important. And it's something I'm even doing now on my Zoom calls. We created a safe space only for Black women because I think we do need that space. It's very important that we do start creating. So again, maybe as a therapist and my creative side, I'm trying to use both to develop these projects. So I feel like
no, that's very fair. And actually, you mentioned being of color creators being forced to tell a story through a lens that isn't necessarily where they're coming from. And I wanted to ask how all of you felt about having these works out there, addressing an issue, knowing that the response, you're looking for support to garner, you're looking to garner support from the wider world to affect change. However, sometimes Western viewpoints can come with condemnation rather than actually empathy. And it's more like, well, you natives are doing this horrible stuff. However, actually, it's, yes, we understand it's a horrible thing, but culturally, there's culture ties, religious ties. And like, as Myriam's film shows, that the mother doesn't want to necessarily hurt her child out of malice. It's tradition and culture for her. So it means more. So it's like, how do you guys feel about having your work out there, knowing that there's, which audience are you trying to appeal to and trying to protect yourself from the negative stuff around it? If anyone can answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I may, because I think what's really exciting about Myriam's film is the gaze is very clearly non-judgmental. And that's kind of the difference, right? When you're coming from a point of view of respecting whoever it is that you're talking about, the community that you're talking about, if you're from the community you're talking about, there is there's not that need to codify and compartmentalize what's happening. These are very nuanced issues, and they're not just black or white, right, wrong, and they're not as simple as, oh, that's awful, I could never do that to my child. So I think you can tell in her film that it doesn't come from that point of view, but ultimately what we're talking about here is, the phrase female gaze has become very popular in recent years, even though it's a, term from the 70s from Laura Mulvey. But what the female gaze is basically saying is that we're not looking at women in a way that objectifies them in a way that patriarchy objectifies them. And I think when we're making work in this way that is a bit more honest and truthful and organic, we're not looking at bodies of color and bodies of culture in a way that objectifies or judges them. We're basically looking at them as individuals rather than a collective, which is something, it's a luxury that's not often afforded to people of color, which I think is really important to know and to see and to sort of weed out in the work that we see made.
Eden, I wanted to ask, thank you. I wanted to ask you quickly, in just a segue into that, your film, Woman, it's humorous in its intention. Was that purposeful, so that, was there any consideration, you didn't want it to be too aggressive or angry, or was it just like, this is how I wanted to tell it? Did you have any consideration on people receiving your film to get that message across? Because I thought it was really cleverly done. You're still on mute.
Sorry, thank you very much. I was saying, I appreciate that because, yeah, it's our humor here with Adrien Gister-Peskin. We are really into kind of middle, like we are feeling divided, I guess. I feel divided as being Black, African, but also European. Mm-hmm. So I think in this way, we are like understanding somehow all the vocabulary or the strategy or simply the way of being European, and how it can be dangerous. I know it can sound strange, but I really feel like this is why we have written a woman like this, is because there is very something sarcastic to be popped out for us to breathe, because really we are, I feel, locked into an eternal system which I cannot give it away like this. So we decided to make it humoristic, but also really pushy, because it's to dynamize, to revitalize things.
That makes sense, guys. And watching, it's, you know, time goes so quickly in these things, so please send through your questions. No, it's not, you guys' answers are perfect. It's more like I'm chatting and I could talk to you all night. However, everyone else has got to get a chance to ask a question, so please put your questions in the chat room. I'll try and quickly scan if there are any questions. Someone wanted to, sorry, just as a side note, someone wanted an explanation of what Afrofuturism is. Eden, I'll hand over to you. You're on mute again.
No, sorry, I'm very sorry. I cannot define Afrofuturism in an academic way, but because I'm not sure of what they call or what it is, but to me it's a way to being conscious of my Afro descendants, and to rescue it, because there are a lot which I couldn't know about my story, as I am I migrant, and in this way I cannot connect to my traditional heritage. So I prefer to call Afrofuturism what I have to share with the world, because it's not it has been modified and also very hurt, very, very deeply hurt. So this is why I'm not sure of Afrofuturism, because here futurism in Europe, it's something which is very fascist. I don't know. So I may not be authoritarian, but I need discipline, and in this way I can connect to Afrofuturism in those words, but again, I'm not sure.
I hear that. I think Afrofuturism is it's a freedom in creativity, and it's that aspiration to a higher plane that, you know, to me, I see it as freedom and where we could be in the future, and how powerful and strong we are in our creativity. That's my interpretation. It's not necessarily the actual definition. Please correct me. Myriam, someone is asking, why did you call, I think it's Beatrice was asking, why did you call your film The Third Sorrow?
Yeah, it was, I mean, poetically, it was for the main character, her first sorrow was to be born a girl, and secondly, the second sorrow was to become a mother. Now the third would be to inflict her past on her daughter and carry that on. But just really quickly echoing what Uzma and Eden was saying as well, that idea of, you know, who are we telling our stories to? And it's quite difficult, because there are things I want to unpack within my own culture. For example, I'm just being like, you know, second generation, being born here in the West, but my mother's from Pakistan. So her views are actually like quite defined by patriarchy, and wanting to challenge those views, like we know with her and her generation, but like not, you know, not have to pander also to a Western audience and have to explain to them my culture or my parents' views. So yeah, it's like an ongoing sort of middle way, really, and we're the generation that's sort of stuck here, that's hopefully going to make that next change.
And Someone's asking, what is the panel's opinion on which is the best platform for content? I don't know, that's somebody in the background. To prompt a conversation okay, sorry, I'll start the question again. What is the panel's opinion on which is the best platform for content to prompt the conversation and change? Is it still the traditional linear platforms like Channel 4, where Leyla's documentary was on, or is it a global streaming platform like Netflix, or is it social media such as YouTube, Facebook, etc.? So I guess because your name was mentioned, Dr. Leyla, I will bring that question to you.
Well, I think we now live in, I think COVID-19 has actually proved you can now, you don't have to wait for a big network for your work actually to be streamed or seen. And if I use filmmakers like Issa Rae, who created Insecure, I forgot the other Nigerian actor from the UK, I forgot her name, who recently made a BBC film on consent. Again,
she's Ghanaian, Michaela Cole.
Ghanaian, that's it. These are filmmakers who were not being commissioned by the big networks. What they've done, they use YouTube. I wouldn't say wait for Netflix or Amazon. If it happens, that's great. But I think what this virus actually has proved, there are other ways of streaming. You can self publish, I guess, in terms of, sorry, I keep breaking out, sorry. So you can self-publish, that's what I'm saying. And people are now using Facebook to stream their films and Instagram. So I don't know what the other panelists think, but this is what I'm seeing at the moment, is not necessarily relying on the big networks like the BBC or Channel 4 or Channel 5.
Does anyone else want to jump in on that?
I mean, I think that's right. I think it also sort of has to start with your story. So think of what your story is and protect that and grow that and incubate that and then see, you know, it's, you've got to get, you have to get very forensic in this industry. Actually, you have to have a really good idea of what are the shows that the BBC has put on before, what are the shows that Channel 4 has put on before. Can I go into any one of those rooms and say, well, look, this is like this show and it did very well. And you have to learn how to speak their language. If you want to be on one of those channels, or if you want to have your television show on Netflix, you know, that is right at the top end of what you're doing. But at the same time, someone like Ratman started off Blue Story on YouTube, and it did incredibly well, and he didn't censor himself in any way, shape or form. And that was then picked up by a larger platform, Paramount, who made the movie. So it really, I think the most important thing, rather than thinking about your platform first and then trying to find a story to sort of fit that, think about how you can get your story to the best place it can possibly be, and then go from there.
And I think the question, I'm trying to pull these questions together. How do you guys how do you get people to engage with your content? Because we have got information overload, and there are so many platforms that you can put your stories out there and have a small community of followers. But when it's something that you really need the world to take notice, which is a big task in itself, what's your methods? Myriam, Eden.
To all the panelists, we have 10 minutes left of this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of engaging an audience, I guess I always do it from a character's point of view. So it's more a journey that's like a personal journey, and you share their experience rather than observe them. I try and make sure that the audience is in with them, feeling what they're feeling, and engaged in that sort of way rather than being on a backseat judging and observing. So as a director or filmmaker, that would be the way I try and approach it. And then in that sense, it also means you're not pandering for the sake of the story. It's more about what this character is going to go and do. And so it becomes about human emotions, rather than whether the plot is conventionally working or whatever. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Eden, did you want to chip in, or just how
Yeah.
to get people interested in your work?
Sorry?
How to get people interested in your work and supporting?
I hope it's not by becoming crazy, but I really feel like today our generation is becoming really transmedia, and I'm into this process of always opening one medium into another. Like I can write and make a book of poetry. After this, I decided to put it into a new shape, and it gives me a lot of literature to put it in Instagram and develop large content and so on. And it's like infinite, and sometimes I connect with other people who shares the same way of doing things, sometimes producers, sometimes practitioners in several things, and we are like building something which is also impacting the reality, but also the virtuality. It's always balancing between both, and I can only talk about what I am experiencing. So this is why I'm thinking a lot about transmedia as a way to connect with people and share interests.
We've got 5 minutes. I wanted to quickly ask Dr. Leyla, you mentioned that you're shouty and you've got a big mouth and you talk out loud about the issues. I guess one thing that I've seen is, I think I've kind of touched on it already, is having our stories on mainstream platforms and having the risk of them being judged in a certain way. So when you do write for places like The Guardian and other kind of platforms like that, do you have that at the back of your mind? Are you bothered by that? And do you feel okay speaking to those mainstream platforms about the issues? Do you feel like you have a responsibility to speak to cultural platforms as well? I mean, I just wanted to know how you feel about that.
For me, it's always been, anything I created or written has always been, it wasn't something I was going to apologize for. Over and over again, what I've seen, again, when we are talking about Black and brown communities, there's this idea of tiptoeing. There's a difference between offending people and calling out the bullshit. Sorry to say that. I think it's important. So for me, I'm not going to watch Black girls being violated over and over again, and society thinking because it's their culture. It's not my culture. I'm a very proud African. I come from, I absolutely embrace my family values, but I will not embrace violence of women and girls. And the issue I've had sometimes, it's editors who will say to you, oh, you sound very angry. I'm worried that you're going to piss off the mosque teachers or the religious leaders. And I said, great, somebody needs to piss them off, because, unless we do it, to me, you have to get very uncomfortable. And I've been okay. I learned over the years to be okay in making people uncomfortable, because when you make somebody uncomfortable, it means they shift their views and ideas. And the big challenge I'm faced with over and over again in these publishing houses or whoever I'm working with in terms of creating projects is always, are we gonna upset the Black people? Are we gonna upset? And I'm always bring them back to, this is about protecting children. That's a university. We wouldn't be having that conversation if it was white girls. And just to say to the panelists, and I think it's important that we do judge. It's important we do judge these issues, because when we're not judging them, then we're saying they're not as valuable, because we do judge when women get raped. We do judge that particular issue. So for me, it's important. And I guess I use my privilege of somebody who is from that community. I have been through it myself. I will judge. That's the whole point. We're human. So, and I don't apologize for it. It means I will piss off a lot of people, but it means a girl will be protected. I think that's the focus. And again, I'm going to keep repeating this. We would never use these narratives of being protective and not offending. Nobody says to white people, have you spoken to the people of cultural, committees? No one ever says that. And I've heard it said by politicians, and I always challenge them. Would you have said this if this was a blonde, blue-eyed girl? And it's always, no. So why? So why when it comes to children who are Black or brown? That's always So, and I would like to encourage, you know, those who are creatives, whether you're a writer, filmmaker, we have to tell these stories, but we tell it in our own way. I'm very similar to Eden. I'm very humorous. FGM is a very difficult subject to tell. But I was running around with vulva cupcakes, offering it to people in South Bank Centre. You know, humor is a big part of me, and that's how I deal with it, and that's how I tell stories. All my articles, if you read it, I'm very humorous. You know, I tried to smuggle vulva cupcakes in a village in Ethiopia. That was the headline, but that's my headline because I did do that. Do you see what I mean? So it's challenging, but unfortunately, sometimes as people of color, we're seen in one way, and it feels like I'm constantly in a battle of in that space.
Well, thank you. I'm going to have to end it there. We've got like 1 minute to go. And I'm sorry if anyone didn't get to ask their question or I didn't read it out. I just would love to thank Raindance Film Festival and 16 Days, 16 Films, and my wonderful panel, Uzma, Myriam, Eden, and Leyla. It's been wonderful, informative, and I really appreciate your time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do we leave or we? Hope you
Great.
enjoyed it. I don't know, yeah, do we go or do we disappear? I don't know.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.